Hi, everybody. My name is Paola Gonzalez, and I'm doing this podcast episode titled Do Animals Lie for my senior seminar podcast over lying and deception titled Lies, Lies, Lies. Throughout time, people have been able to naturally deceive and lie by saying that they're on their way, but in reality, they barely just got in the shower, or by saying that they're gonna pass their test. Especially with New Year's resolutions, I've noticed that a lot of people lie and say that they're gonna be losing weight, they're gonna be eating healthier, little things like that, and then they end up not doing any of that. Society thinks that humans are the only ones able to lie and deceive others for their personal benefit. Which begs the question, since people are animals, do all animals lie? In what ways do animals lie? Do plants lie? In this podcast episode, we'll dive into this topic. In biology class, one of the first things that they taught us was that there's two different types of cells. There's eukaryotic cells, which are the ones that have the mitochondria, the nucleus, all of that good stuff. And then there's the prokaryotic cells, which are normally like bacteria. They're able to, which are able to recreate asexually. But the ones that we're going to be talking about today are the eukaryotic cells. So, as I stated before, scientists have proved that eukaryotic cells are all of the ones that have a nucleus or a brain, and they're in all living things. So they're in all plants, all animals, and all humans, obviously. And so for the most part, whenever you think about someone lying, you always think about humans. You think about the way that humans lie, how they're able to deceive, and how they think about lying and deceiving, even though they know that that's wrong. But do people ever think about how animals or even plants deceive or lie? If all eukaryotic cells have a so-called brain, are they all able to deceive? That's a question that came up in some of my research whenever I was looking at some of the stuff that we were looking at. The result of what I researched was, yes, all living beings and living things lie. Anything that is a eukaryotic cell or has a eukaryotic cell lies. Do they all lie for the same purpose? No. A lot of humans obviously lie knowing that it's wrong, but animals and plants, they do it for survival purposes. But all of them do it for their personal benefit. Everybody, all living things lie for their personal benefit. Animals like chameleons, who change their appearance based on their surroundings, they're deceiving, so that they're lying in that situation. Plants, like Venus flytraps, who lure to all types of insects by deceiving them into thinking that they're just a regular plant, but in reality, they're waiting to kill them at just the right moment for their benefit. That's another lie. They're also deceiving. But whenever you look at these types of deceptions, you don't think of it as lying. You think of it as mimicry. You think of it as different survival tactics. These features in plants and animals that help deceive for their own benefit is called mimicry. And there's three main kinds, although scientists have found that there's so many more. But the three main kinds are aggressive mimicry, Batesian mimicry, and Müllerian mimicry. The first one that we're going to start off with is aggressive mimicry, just because I feel like it's one of the most common ones. Aggressive mimicry is kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing, where they seem non-threatening in order to kill its prey. So some of the types of animals that partake in aggressive mimicry are jumping spiders, which for anyone who doesn't know what those are, they literally mimic their prey in order to eat them. They're spiders, but they look like little ants, which they eat ants anyways, but they look like ants, like all of their legs and everything. I don't know, you have to look up a picture or something, but they look like ants, and they will go into these little colonies of ants, and the ants don't see anything wrong with this spider because it looks like one of them, but they'll mimic the ants, and then they end up eating them. So that's one of the examples. Another example is an alligator snapping turtle. So instead of the jumping spider, which mimics its prey, the alligator snapping turtle mimics itself into an inanimate object. They look like a log of wood. Like if you look at it just laying in the lake, it looks like wood. So a lot of people will like touch the shell, well, touch the log of wood, but it's in reality it's the shell, and then the snapping turtle ends up snapping at them, which obviously is very painful. Another type of mimicry is Batesian mimicry. This type of mimicry is where animals mimic other toxic or venomous animals. So, an example of this one is the milk snake and then the venomous coral snake. So I know that all of y'all have seen the venomous coral snake. It's like red, black, and I think yellow. And it's a very specific order, but if you see it, it's a very venomous. Like you're not even supposed to be touching it, or I get too even scared to even look at them. So I try to stay far, far away from anywhere that could have a snake. But there's milk snakes, which they have the exact same colors, it's just in a different sequence. So for predators, they might not know which one is the difference. So they just avoid them at all cost. Obviously, everybody tends to avoid them at all cost just because they mimic venomous animals, which in this case is the venomous coral snake. Another example of the Batesian mimicry is the monarch butterfly and the viceroy butterfly. So monarch butterflies are very, very toxic to animals. Anybody who ingests them, I would say animals, obviously not people, but anyone who ingests monarch butterflies, it's very toxic for you. But the viceroy butterflies look the exact same, but they're tasty. They're supposed to be really, really good for predators that like butterflies. So what the viceroy butterflies have done throughout time, they mimic monarch butterflies in order to survive, obviously, in their environment. The last example, or the last type of mimicry, is the Müllerian mimicry. This is where two or more protected species mimic each other. So what I mean by protected is basically animals that have no problem fighting off a predator. The main example that I could find is the cuckoo bee and the yellow jacket. Both of them are considered predators in their environment, and they both look pretty much alike, but they tend to mimic each other just because they both are very venomous and they're considered predators. A question that came up throughout my research was if mimicking has always been a thing or if it's been formed through evolution. The main thing that I found was that it's not always been a thing. Natural selection and survival of the fittest has caused them to form this mimicking tactic in order for them to be able to survive in their environment. So I would say that not all animals used to lie, but throughout evolution and throughout time, because they weren't able to survive, it has caused them to lie and deceive for their own benefit. Now that we've talked about all of the different types of mimicry and the way that animals and plants can lie and deceive other animals and plants and even people, we'll get into people. In what ways do people mimic? And is this a tactic that happens throughout all organisms, or is it just based on plants and animals? Some of the research that I found is that we actually do mimic other people, believe it or not. I didn't really believe that we did, and it's actually something that we do subconsciously. So whenever you're mimicking someone, you don't really realize that you're doing it until you do it and until you really look at the fact that you're doing it, if that makes sense. But an example of the way that we mimic other people is that we mimic facial expressions, which to me, it kind of sounds like you're just showing compassion or you're showing empathy. But an example is if a person physically is showing you that they're sad, you automatically feel sad too, and you want to cry, or you have a change of attitude, you want to hug them, stuff like that. Or even there is also other types of mimicry that we do, like verbal mimicry, where we match the characteristics of the way that people speak. An example of this is whenever people who grew up in a specific country, like Australian or British people, and they come and live in another country, like when they come and live in the United States for a long period of time, they start losing their accent because they start assimilating to the culture around them, which is the American culture. We don't have an accent for the most part. But whenever you do that, whenever you put people in that type of situations, you they start mimicking the word and the consonants and the stuff that people use around them. Which to me, I didn't even realize that that was a form of mimicking until I started looking at this research and started seeing that this is an actual way that people mimic other people without even realizing it. This leads me into my next topic. These types of mimicry that we do, by mimicry I say mimicking facial expressions and verbal mimicry, we do both of those things unconsciously instead of animals who have done it for their benefit. But I started thinking, do we mimic in the same way that animals mimic? So, by aggressive mimicry or by Batesian mimicry, by Mullerian mimicry, do we do those things? And if we do we do them for our benefit? The only really good example I found when it comes to us using the same mimicry that animals and plants use was, for example, for aggressive mimicry, which, for those of you who don't remember, it's the wolves in sheep's clothing type of mimicry where they may seem non threatening in order to kill its prey or in order to get something out of or for their benefit. The only main example that I could find about this when in regards to humans is criminals. Whenever criminals tend to look non-threatening or non-deceiving in order to get something out of its prey or its victim in human terminology. For Batesian mimicry, this is where the animals mimic other toxic or venomous animals in order to survive. The example that I had provided was the milk snake and the venomous coral snake, or the viceroy butterfly and the monarch butterfly. In regards to humans, I feel like we could be able to do this type of mimicry. It really just depends on the person. But for example, if you want to seem like someone that you're not, like the biggest example that I can think about is where people will rent out or even buy secondhand a lot of expensive items and they wear it. So like they'll buy a bunch of designer brands even though they don't have the most money in the entire world. But if you were a stranger looking at them in the street or at a mall or something, you would think that they have a lot of money because they're wearing a lot of designer clothes, even though their bank account might not match. I think that this could be an example of Batesian mimicry, even if the professional definition of Batesian mimicry is animals that mimic toxic or venomous animals. Obviously, we're not mimicking toxic or venomous people, but we are, in this situation or in this scenario, we would be mimicking people who we want to look like or we want to be like. And the last type of mimicry that we had touched on was Mullerian mimicry, which is where two or more protected species mimic each other. So, like I said, we had talked about the cuckoo and the yellow jacket, where both of them are considered predators and they both look alike. Whenever I was thinking about this one, I thought about where two people are in the same friend group and they start mimicking each other just because they hang out all the time, they start seeing each other, they start seeing themselves in each other, and they, gravitate more towards each other because they have so many things in common, stuff like that. And that's an example that I thought about, but y'all let me know what y'all think. But I just really didn't know any information when it came to animals and how they lie and deceive, and just looking at all of this research just really opened my eyes into seeing all of the different types of animals and the way that they lie, even if we don't even consider it lying or even if we never thought about it as lying. They do lie. Plants even lie as well. And even seeing how people use the same type of mimicry tactics that animals do and vice versa. I think that that humans and animals and even plants are more alike than we would like to acknowledge. And I hope that in the future we get to see a little bit more research and a little bit more information about this topic. I hope that y'all enjoyed my podcast, and I hope that y'all have a good day. Bye!